Hello, today we are going to prove that vertical angles are congruent. And of course, before we prove that vertical angles are congruent, we want to know what vertical angles are. So let me show you really fast. This may be a review for some of you. So you have vertical angles show up when you have two intersecting lines. Let me use different colors to show contrast. So you have red line and blue line, and vertical angles are the angles that are opposite each other. So that's one angle, and this one and this one, these two are vertical angles because they are opposite each other. And there's another pair of vertical angles that show up. You may be able to guess. This angle and this angle are vertical angles because they are opposite each other. And I'm going to prove that vertical angles have the same measure. So let's call this angle to have, let's call this angle triangle. This angle, let me label it as triangle. And this angle, let me label as circle. And we wish to show that this angle is also a triangle. So that's the task we have before us. And before we prove anything, you know that a line has angle measure of 180 degrees just by definition. So you know this triangle, you know the triangle plus circle, since they make up a line, this blue line is going to be 180 degrees. And we know this angle, let's call it x. You know this x, when added to circle, also gets 180. This red line, you're going to get 180 when you add up x and the circle. So we want to find the value that when you add up with the circle, you get 180. And that's precisely the triangle, because triangle plus circle is 180. So our x is also a triangle, and these vertical angles have the same measure, the triangle, and we are done. And there's algebraic way of proving this, and that's going to be shown by my younger brother right now. So now let's try to prove that vertical angles are congruent algebraically. So let's do the same thing. Let's draw a red line. And let's draw a blue line. Now we want to prove that this angle and this angle are congruent, and that this angle and this angle are congruent. So let's start. We're first gonna call this angle measure right here theta. Now, as mentioned above, a line has a degree of 180 degrees. So the degree measure of the blue line has to be 180 degrees. So this angle measure has to be 180 minus theta, because these two have to add up to equal 180, and 180 minus theta plus theta is 180. Now we're going to look at the red line. Now this also has to be 180 degrees by definition. So now using the same logic, we know that this angle right here has to be 180 minus this angle measure right here. So minus 180 minus theta. So now if we substitute the negative, we get 180 minus 180, and a negative 1 times a negative theta, that makes the plus theta, and that the 180's cancel out, and we get theta. So this angle measure has to be theta. And now we have proven that this angle and this angle are congruent. Now we just have one more step to go. We just have to prove that this angle measure right here is 180 minus theta. And that's pretty easy, because this angle measure right here for the blue has to be 180. So this right here has to be 180 minus theta. And we're done.